Test, test, test.
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
All right, the January 9th, 2024 meeting of the Monroe County Legislature will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart is present. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy is present. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines is present. Mr. Blankley. Mr. Blankley is present. Ms. Bonnick. Ms. Bonnick is present. Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew is present. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess is present. Mr. Chardy is excused. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby is present. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz is present. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman.
Present.
Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman is present. Mrs. DeFlorio. Mrs. DeFlorio is present. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer is present. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier is present. Ms. Hasman. Ms. Hasman is present. Ms. Hughes Smith. Ms. Hughes Smith is present. Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns is present. Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller is present. Mr. Long. Mr. Long is present. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci is present. Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe is present. Ms. McIntyre. Ms. McIntyre is present. Mr. Milne. Mr. Milne is present. Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris is present. President Roman.
Here.
President Roman is present. Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair is present. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith is present. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons is present. Mr. Udelson. Mr. Udelson is present.
Please join me in a moment of silent prayer. Please stand as Legislator Bartholomew McCoy will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Your copies of Day 12 of 2023, December 12th, 2023, and Day 1 of 2024, January 2nd, 2024, are available through Novus Agenda. Without exception, these journals will stand approved as submitted. Legislators, the referrals submitted to the legislature for the next committee cycle are available on Novus Agenda as well as online. There are no proclamations scheduled for this meeting and this evening. There are also no formal committee reports scheduled for this evening. We will now hold the public forum. We have several people registered to address the legislature. Mr. Clerk.
If you require assistance, a deputy is available to assist you in approaching the lectern. I will call 3 people forward at one time. Each speaker will have 2 minutes in which to address the legislature, and kindly conclude your remarks when the timer sounds and exit through the back of the chambers over here to my right. And thank you for your cooperation. Our first 3 speakers are Terrence Schnurr, Paul Forcella, and Jeffrey Rogers.
Good evening, Madam President. The following is almost what I would have said here on the night of Tuesday, December 12th, 2023, had 24 legislators not begrudged me and a few others, mostly social workers, several minutes of your time. Over the past 2 years, time limits on public comment in this chamber have been enforced with consistent inconsistency. The strictness, leniency, or complete absence of enforcement has been a function of one government actor's feelings about what was being said, defying the constitutional principle that the enforcement of time, place, and manner restrictions on speech must be content neutral. Her other abuses of power are too many to count, much less list. But special mention should be made of those relating to her efforts to usurp this legislature's authority to appoint a public defender, which left that vital office and its indigent clients under a cloud of uncertainty for a year. If we learn only one lesson from the experiences of the past 2 years, let it be this: her political career must end forever in 19 days, and Sabrina Lamar must never be entrusted with, she's not a member, Madam President, must never be entrusted with the slightest bit of governmental authority again. Thank you and have a good night.
This statement is for anyone willing to listen. The homeless problem in Rochester remains very serious, and it should be thoroughly addressed right away. Space exploration, both manned and unmanned, is important. Man should colonize and have permanent manned bases on the moon and Mars, but man should go far beyond our solar system and colonize other solar systems light years away. Proper safety steps should be taken to make sure the exploration is safe for man. Unmanned probes should pave the way. Voyager 1 and 2 started that paving. They are now about 14 billion miles away and leaving us forever. The US federal deficit is huge, but there are ways to earn money and hence cut the deficit to zero. Our sun produces huge amounts of energy. Most goes into space wasted. Solar satellites set near the sun can capture huge amounts of energy, which can be brought to Earth and be sold at huge profits. The water of our oceans could be sold for drinking after it is mined and completely desalted and demineralized, since there always is a demand for water. Eventually, the water would come back to the oceans. This water could be sold at huge profit. Viruses and sickness remain a problem. There should be more encouragement for people to wear masks and get appropriate vaccinations. Steps should be made to detect and appropriately repel near-Earth objects such as asteroids. These may be dark and near Earth we don't see. We should keep eternal lookout for them. The search, time's up. Thank you.
Our next three speakers are Marcus C. Williams, Kevin Lockhart, and Matthew Isles.
Hello, Marcus C. Williams here. Happy New Year. I'd like to jump into a few things real quick because we don't have much time. First of all, there's a lot of money that's being spent. I saw the I think it was called the RIDE program or whatever it was that just went out. I like that. That's a great idea. I'd like to see a similar thing go out for people whose cars have been broken into and have been stolen, as far as what's happened this year with all of the carjackings and the car robberies and break-ins. I'd also like to see a similar program for people that want to buy electric scooters and electric bikes. We talk a lot about what we can do to improve our environment and all of these bike lanes and stuff like that. I'd like to see some real impact and something to move the needle there with that. And I believe we could, if we give some people some money back after they purchase alternative transport mobility solution, and then we give them some money back, you know, something like that. Also, I'd like to talk to the rest of the people here that are on the non-majority side right now. I believe that more solutions need to be put forth, even if you're not in power. I believe that those that are in power should work bipartisan, okay, with everybody for the best interest of everybody in the county. And I know that there has been a lot of back and forth where people have said that they don't necessarily want to do that, but I know that a lot of you do have a good spirit and care about all of the people in our county. So I'm looking forward to that. So, and another thing, I'd like to see some stuff done as far as nuclear power and hydropower actually being explored instead of us talking about taking RG&E and putting it into a public utility. I believe that we need to focus on actually creating power in our county so that we can actually provide people in this giant electric future that is coming. And the last thing is, I believe that we need to look into funding firehouses to actually equip them with the ability to have EMS and emergency response vehicles issued out of them, because we have a serious issue with ambulances and ambulance shortages right now. So thank you guys. You guys be blessed and be well.
Amazing. Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Lockhart. I came here today to address the apathy of the citizens and the corrupt nature of this government. Rochester's society resembles a 19th century Democrat plantation characterized by broken housing, violence, dependence, despair, and inadequate schools. This unequal system and dual government is wrong, racist, and immoral. It must end by merging city and county government for true equality, a single government for all residents of Monroe County. The immoral dual government structure, where city residents have only 1/5 of a vote compared to county residents, results in disparities in funding, law enforcement, and representation. This unequal two-tiered system, where 200,000 county residents lack even the most basic infrastructure, means that for every 5 elected representatives in the county, there's only 1 for Rochester, critically reducing residents' influence and resources. By my count, approximately 38 city council and 38 school board positions remain unestablished and unfulfilled. As a result, fentanyl and narcotics drug dealers and vicious homicidal gangs of serial killers have taken over our streets, making our neighborhoods unsafe for families to live and unsafe even for the police. We have to rid our county of the gangs and drug dealers. We must defeat them. The 1/5 rule of unequal governance is the root cause of the violence and despair in Rochester. It continues to victimize this community daily. This dual government is unprecedented. Even the Confederacy was willing to negotiate a 3/5 clause for their dependents. Yet the Democrats have made it very clear they will make no negotiations. They want you to be grateful that they gave you the 1/5 as opposed to 0, and they have no plans to consolidate the structure because of how much it benefits them. If their slogan is no justice, no peace, then our slogan will be justice and peace. Secondly, I must advocate for the removal of Senator Chuck Schumer from office and his expulsion from Monroe County, a justified response to his alleged actions hindering Capitol Police during J6, causing harm to those who valiantly defended the Capitol. It's time to make history together, breaking chains and ensuring every resident is whole and equal. Let's peacefully abide.
Thank you very much. Yep. All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Matthew Isles. I live in Arundecoit. My wife grew up here and we moved here together from Boston 6 years ago to raise our kids. I'm an active member of Color Arundecoit Green and Walk Bike Arundecoit. My family and I love our county parks, waterways, libraries, and businesses. Thank you for your leadership in passing the Monroe County Climate Action Plan, and thanks for hiring a coordinator to help implement the climate action plan. I'm here today on behalf of the Color Your Community Green Network with a request that the county please hire a director to oversee the implementation of the plan, along with the active transportation plan and the comprehensive plan. Color Your Community Green also requests that the county build and maintain multiple organic waste compost facilities in the county, and that the county rapidly move past feasibility studies and implements composting as soon as possible. Composting organics generated locally reduces methane production. When food waste sits in a landfill rotting alongside non-biodegradable materials, it releases methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. However, when these food scraps are composted along with paper and yard waste, they turn into usable, healthy compost. This compost enriches soil without the use of harmful chemicals and reduces the release of methane and carbon dioxide. Additionally, making compost employs approximately 2 times more workers than landfills on a per ton basis. Compost from county facilities could be used in county parks and street landscaping, town landscaping, or given back to community members, all without any more cost than running the compost facilities. Currently, the county is essentially throwing away money when households and restaurants put organic waste into the trash. We would do well to divert our organic waste for more productive purposes, especially considering the rapidly shrinking capacity of our landfills. Thank you very much.
This concludes the public forum.
We will now proceed with the consideration of motions, resolutions, and notices. My mic is not. I didn't do anything. Oh, hello? There you go. We will now proceed with the considerations of motions, resolutions, and notices. Will the clerk read the next item on the agenda?
Item number 1, providing that the elections for Deputy Clerk of the Legislature, First Assistant Deputy Clerk of the Legislature, Second Assistant Deputy Clerk of the Legislature be lifted from the table.
Moved by Legislator Udelson, second by Legislator Baines. This is to lift from the table. All in favor? Any opposed? Item carries.
Item number 2, election for position of Deputy Clerk of the Legislature and Second Assistant Deputy Clerk of the Legislature.
The floor is now open for the purposes of nominating a Deputy Clerk of the Legislature and Second Assistant Deputy Clerk of the Legislature.
I move to appoint Najali Santiago as Deputy Clerk of the Legislature and Kelsey Sackett as the Second Assistant Deputy Clerk of the Legislature.
Seconded by Legislator Baines and Blankley and Santos. And Cruz, my apologies. Are there any other nominations? Yes.
Yes, Madam President, I'd like to nominate Ian Watkins to serve as Deputy Clerk of the Legislature.
Second.
And I'd also like to nominate Ian Watkins to serve as the Second Deputy Clerk of the Legislature.
Any other nominations? I now declare the nominations closed, and we will now vote with a singular vote for the entire slate as presented. The clerk will call the roll. Please respond by stating the last name of the nominees of your choice. If you choose not to vote for a candidate, please respond with the word abstain. I understand. We will begin with Deputy Clerk. Yeah, so we start with Deputy.
It's separate, correct? Hang on 1 second. Who seconded that? I'm sorry. Legislator Dondorfer seconded. And this is to sever the 2 positions that we just had on the floor.
We will begin with the Deputy Clerk.
Oh, we got the vote on.
Oh, okay.
All in favor to,
All in favor for severing? All opposed?
so now we are voting for the deputy clerk of the legislature, which is Santiago or Watkins. Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart votes for Santiago. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy votes Santiago. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines votes Santiago. Mr. Blankley. Mr. Blankley votes Santiago. Ms. Bonnick. Ms. Bonnick votes Santiago. Mr. Brew. Brew votes Watkins. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes Santiago. Mr. Chardy is excused. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby votes Watkins. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz votes Santiago. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman.
Santiago.
Delvecchio Hoffman votes Santiago. Mrs. DeFlorio. Mrs. DeFlorio votes Watkins. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer votes Watkins. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier votes Santiago. Ms. Hasman. Ms. Hasman votes Santiago. Ms. Hugh Smith. Ms. Hugh Smith votes Santiago. Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns votes Watkins. Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller votes Watkins. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes Santiago. Mr. Mafucci. Mafucci votes Santiago. Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe votes Santiago. Ms. McIntyre. Ms. McIntyre votes Watkins. Mr. Milne. Mr. Milne votes Watkins. Mr. Morris. Morris votes Watkins. Ms. Roman.
Santiago.
Ms. Roman votes Santiago. Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair votes Watkins. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith votes Watkins. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes Santiago. Mr. Udelson. Mr. Udelson votes Santiago. 17 votes for Santiago. 11 votes for Watkins. Santiago is the deputy clerk of the legislature. Thank you. And then we have Sackett and Watkins for second assistant. Ms. Barnhart. Barnhart votes Sackett. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy votes Sackett. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines votes Sackett. Mr. Blankley. Mr. Blankley votes Sackett. Ms. Bonnick. Ms. Bonnick votes Sackett. Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew votes Watkins. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes Sackett. Mr. Chardy is excused. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby votes Watkins. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz votes Sackett. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman.
Sackett.
Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman votes Sackett. Mrs. DeFlorio. Mrs. DeFlorio votes Watkins. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer votes Watkins. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier votes Sackett. Ms. Hasman. Ms. Hasman votes Sackett. Ms. Hugh Smith. Ms. Hugh Smith votes Sackett. Mr. Johns. Johns votes Watkins. Mr. Keller. Keller votes Watkins. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes Sackett. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci votes Sackett. Mr. McCabe. McCabe votes Watkins. Ms. McIntyre. McIntyre votes Watkins. Mr. Milne. Mr. Milne votes Watkins. Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris votes Watkins. Ms. Roman.
Sackett.
Roman votes Sackett. Mr. Sinclair. Sinclair votes Watkins. Ms. Smith. Smith votes Watkins. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Vasquez Simmons votes Sackett. Mr. Udelson. Udelson votes Sackett. 16 votes for Sackett. 12 votes for Watkins. Ms. Sackett is the second assistant deputy clerk of the legislature.
Item carries. Congratulations. We will now proceed with the matters of urgency for tonight's meeting.
Item number 3, referral 24-0039, appointment to the Monroe County Climate Action Plan Advisory Committee.
Moved by legislator Udelson, second by legislator Burgess. Mafucci,
I have seconded by legislators Barnhart, Burgess, and Mafucci. Am I missing anybody? Did I hear Hasman as well? And legislator Hasman. Got it.
before we get to any discussion, both of these referrals and the next referral were submitted with clerical error. Both referrals have no impact on the budget and will be reflected on the resolution. Now, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Roll call vote.
Roll call vote. Ms. Barnhart. Ms. Barnhart votes yes. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy. Ms. Bartholomew McCoy votes yes. Mr. Baines. Mr. Baines votes yes. Mr. Blankley. Mr. Blankley votes yes. Ms. Bonnick. Ms. Bonnick votes yes. Mr. Brew. Mr. Brew votes no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes yes. Mr. Chardy is excused. Mr. Colby. Mr. Colby votes no. Mr. Cruz. Mr. Cruz votes yes. Ms. Delvecchia Hoffman.
Yes.
Ms. Delvecchia Hoffman votes yes. Mrs. DeFlorio. Mrs. DeFlorio votes yes. Mr. Dondorfer. Mr. Dondorfer votes yes. Mr. Frazier. Mr. Frazier votes yes. Ms. Hasman. Ms. Hasman votes yes. Ms. Hughes Smith. Ms. Hughes Smith votes yes. Mr. Johns. Mr. Johns votes yes. Mr. Keller. Mr. Keller votes no. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes yes. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci votes yes. Mr. McCabe. Mr. McCabe votes no. Ms. McIntyre. Ms. McIntyre votes yes. Mr. Milne. Milne votes yes. Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris votes no. Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair votes no. Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith votes no. Ms. Vasquez Simmons. Ms. Vasquez Simmons votes yes. Mr. Udelson. Mr. Udelson votes yes. President Roman.
Yes.
President Roman votes yes. 21-7, resolution passes. Item number 4, referral 24-0040, confirming the appointment of legislative representative to Monroe Community College Board of Trustees.
Moved by legislator Udelson, seconded by legislator Burgess and Mafucci. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Item carries. There being no unfinished business, legislator Udelson.
Legislature is, next meeting of the Monroe County Legislature is Tuesday, February 13th, 2024 at 6 p.m.
All right.